So hi everyone, I'm here with Colin Brown, who's the CEO of Aryza. And Aryza are a software company that specialises with software solutions really across the whole of the debt cycle. So Colin, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
So I suppose first off, I'm kind of interested in, we've just gone into a new lockdown, I suppose, and the COVID crisis, COVID cases are just starting to increase again. And I suppose it's just how you sort of feel that's going to impact your business and what you're seeing in the collection space and in the financial services space.
Yeah, well, if I look forward to where Aryza, the group, started, which was in insolvency case management, what we've seen as a result of the first lockdown and since March is that there was a decline in insolvency numbers. Now, a lot of that we would attribute to kind of forbearance and also kind of the government schemes. A lot of the government schemes would have probably delayed individuals from going into an insolvency arrangement. So I think with kind of continued forbearance and the continued government schemes, I do believe that we'll continue to see this softness in the number of individuals and corporates going insolvent. We've seen the big switch move to collections because suddenly a lot of the creditors were left with these huge kind of volumes of consumers and corporates that they had to give payment breaks to. And with the working from home situation and the move away from that kind of centralized call center to a more kind of remote type call center, there was a much bigger need for digital solutions to provide the ability to cater for the kind of high volume requests that they were receiving.
So as you say, all throughout the COVID pandemic, there's been a big migration across to digital, and that's sort of been accelerating. So as we get into it must be like 9 months now. Do you think it's got any sign of like slowing down, or do you think it's just we're just gonna keep perpetuating, sort of like getting more and more digital? I mean, is this the new reality we've got to live with?
Yeah, look, I definitely think there's going to be this kind of new reality, this new norm, in that the digital world, certainly in terms of collections, has really got going. So prior to COVID, there was an awful lot of talk about the use of open banking and how open banking will be, really beneficial in the collection space. But I don't think there was any really real drive by any of the financial institutes to actually adopt open banking. And certainly there was, I felt, and this is my opinion, that there was almost a kind of wait and see approach. Let's wait and see how this develops. Let's wait and see if any of our competitors adopt open banking. But what we've seen since March is that, again, going back to that piece around working from home, the bigger volumes that needed to be dealt with, from consumers looking for payment breaks, etc. We've seen that people were a lot quicker then to adopt technology solutions, because what the technology allowed you to do was kind of using that open banking data and kind of the credit bureau searches. You were able to get a very quick picture of a consumer, and you were able to provide them with a more personalized approach to that kind of collection space. So no longer was it one conversation. You were able to have a personalized conversation with the consumer because you had the power of the data to properly analyze their particular set of circumstances.
And specifically for open banking, I mean, there was some resistance, I think, from either from the consumer side as well as you say, even within the industry, in terms of just trying to find the use case in certain sectors. I mean, do you think that's the barriers lowered now as a result of the pandemic? And I suppose the follow-on question for that is the barrier lowered, but is that because of just we got used to it, or we've just learned how to use it? And why do you think it is, if it has?
Well, I think to me it's very similar to how Zoom suddenly became the way to communicate, because Zoom didn't just appear last March. Zoom and Teams and video, it's been around, but people were still stuck on using mobile phones and using email, etc. And then when kind of March 2020 hit and we were suddenly all told to work from home, Zoom became the thing that people got used to very quickly. And I think that's what I see happening with open banking, is that open banking didn't just suddenly appear in March. It's been around and it's been kind of talked about for quite some time. But as a result of what happened last year, people adopted it a lot quicker, and consumers got used to it, etc. So we've seen kind of some really good uptake in our kind of digital collections platform and the use of the open banking piece of that from a consumer perspective. So we've seen upwards to 40 to 50% of consumers actually using the open banking journey as opposed to entering manual data. Because, well, one, it's a 2-minute journey versus a 45-minute journey. And secondly, I think it is the fact that now we are now used to sitting in front of the computer at home and doing things digitally rather than the more traditional kind of telephone conversations, etc. So I think the pandemic has accelerated the requirement for digital solutions, but I don't see us taking a step back. I think that now is the way forward.
Yeah. So just on digital, so you can sort of see this acceleration of digitals going on, and I suppose almost like on one end you've got 100% automated, and we might want to get to there, and the other end you've got the 100% manual sort of processing, and I suppose we're sort of definitely making steps towards the digital side of things. I mean, how far do you think it can go? Do you think we're barreling down to just be 100% automated, or do you think there's still that human interaction that needs to be there, and where's the sweet spot?
Yeah, look, I don't know the answer to where the sweet spot is, but I don't believe that it should be 100% one way or the other, and especially when we talk about kind of financial vulnerability. There's some people that want to talk to a human. Don't want to go through a digital journey, and I think you always have to kind of allow for that. But equally, there's some people that just won't talk to a human, and they're embarrassed by their situation. So for them, a digital journey is the right answer. And if you look at what you can achieve in a digital journey versus what an agent can achieve, it's incomparable. Like using open banking, we can gather months and months of bank statements at the click of a button, and we can categorize that then into particular spends. Now imagine trying to do that on a phone call. Imagine trying to tell somebody on a phone call, well, based on the data you've just told me, I can tell you spend on average 300 quid a month, on groceries. It would take so long to gather enough information to make that statement. However, with open banking, you can do that in 60 seconds. It's that quick. And then once you have that information, which is golden, you can now make kind of personalized solutions for that consumer to allow them to get out of that kind of vulnerable situation that they're currently in. And that's really where the power of using the data. But I don't think you'll ever get away from the human factor. Somebody just needs to talk to somebody, because sometimes with vulnerable people, it's as much about therapy as anything else, that they just need to tell someone, because they will be hiding a lot of this from kind of their closest kind of family and friends, and to be able to talk to a stranger and tell them about their kind of financial difficulties is important. So I think a hybrid of both this kind of manual process and the digital process, I think is to me is the perfect solution for vulnerability anyway.
So you're chatting there, and it reminded me almost like going back to the days of the Industrial Revolution, right? And beforehand, we used to have people doing everything. So people were doing the manufacturing, everything. Machines came along, and they took some of those things, and the machines are better at stamping out pieces of metal or chopping bits of wood than humans ever would be. But the humans didn't disappear. So you still need the humans. I suppose it's just how do we find the right role for humans versus machines, and what do humans do well versus what do machines do well? And I mean, where do you think that is? I mean, in terms of like going forward, I mean, is there a role for the human interaction that's going to be different from what it is from a machine point of view?
Yeah, well, I think what where the human interaction I think is important is dealing with emotion, but also in ensuring that a consumer or a corporate entity is is properly educated. So while a computer can present the options based on data and get to kind of levels of accuracy that the human probably can't, the human can then kind of be the one to ensure that the consumer then once given that options has then made the best choice for them. So I think I definitely think you need to have both. But I think what the kind of pandemic and kind of the use of the data, it's just has accelerated the ability for us now to do things on a more personalized basis, which we weren't doing before. Because if you think of it, and I just go back to the kind of collections piece, it was a process. You rang someone, you put them on a payment plan. You didn't necessarily have the time to go through every aspect of that person's financial life to figure out what they're doing well versus what they're not doing well, where they can make savings. So some of the tools we're developing is about providing those options so that when someone goes into this kind of collections journey, that it doesn't feel like someone's chasing them. It actually feels like someone is trying to help and support and prevent them from finding themselves in that situation again. And we do that by being able to present utility switching to them, for example. So listen, we've looked at your open banking. On average, you spend £50 a month on broadband, but actually we know we can get a better deal for you for £40 a month. So now you're £10 better off in disposable income. And if you do that across all their utilities, if you then look at have they got the right benefits, if you provide them with as many options as possible, you can probably make them well off enough that will prevent them, going into spiraling out of control or going into further problems. And I think that's where the data benefits. Where the data doesn't benefit is maybe where there's 2 or 3 options presented to a consumer, and having someone on the end of the phone to be able to talk them through, okay, here are the 3 options, and explaining in a kind of layman's term and simplified terms, and ensuring that they understand what each of these options is doing. I think that's where the human element comes in. So if we can accelerate the kind of data capture and accelerate, and probably deal with kind of the consumers that are financially savvy enough to make their own, choose their own options, and then the human element is for those who may not be financially savvy or who need that extra piece of help.
And so we chatted a little bit before about customization and how customized can you make it? I mean, how customized do you think you can make these decisions with extra data? I mean, open banking is one stream of information. I mean, what other information is out there that can be used really to drive these sort of like customized solutions?
Well, we have the credit bureau searches as well, which is available. So using someone like Experian, we can form a kind of a picture of that person. I mean, there's car valuation websites, there's property valuation websites, and that then starts to build up a picture of their assets. So you've got the kind of the bank statements, which is their monthly income and monthly expenditure. You can get a picture of how much their assets are worth. You can get a picture of what their liabilities are. And now you're really formulating a really kind of good picture. But it's what you do with that data. Data is only as good as what you do with it. And I think to be able to give a consumer or a corporate entity back some options on, well, you can make savings in the following, or potentially you could sell this asset off and buy, a similar asset kind of cheaper. There's lots that you can do that then can make consumers that much more kind of financially fitter, and try and prevent them from going into maybe an insolvency solution. But if they do, if that's the right solution for them, that actually you need to consider an insolvency solution. I think in the true spirit of TCF and treating the customer fairly, that's what I think we should be doing. We should be telling the consumer, look, you need to seek debt advice at this point in time or not, and what that will do for the businesses or the lenders or the creditors, it's going to increase their brand. They're going to be known as somebody that helps, and not just that they're kind of, they're just a lender. They're more than just a lender. They're a lender who help. And I think there's a big push for TCF and treating the customer fairly. But I think the only way you can do that is by capturing a full profile of that customer through open banking, through the bureau searches, etc.
And so just you chatting there, I was thinking, do you think there's a disconnect between if you're solving an equation, let's say, for what the customer wants, which is, it might be to pay off their account or pay down their debt, but you're also solving an equation for what the lender might want or what the business might want. Sometimes those things aren't necessarily aligned. I mean, do you think we understand enough around what is the equation we're solving for? So I understand it certainly from a lender point of view, but are there other ways to solve the equation, and do we need to present those, or do we even need to have an understanding of those? I mean, what's the equation we're sort of solving it for?
I definitely think we need to understand better why consumers or corporate entities, why they find themselves in these situations, and what we can do in order to help. And if that's through advice, and that's all we can do, surely it's a better conversation to have. But two, if we know that somebody is overspending on satellite TV, or they're overspending on broadband, and or what, because we've got captured their data, surely it would make sense to advise them of other deals where they can increase their disposable income, because them increasing their disposable income gives them a better chance at paying back whatever loans or credit cards they may have with you. So I think understanding the end consumer or end corporate entity, understanding that, I think, is key to solving the equation. Look, there will be straightforward cases which can be dealt with, but there are the more complicated scenarios. There are the husband and wife where all the bills are in the wife's name, and now the husband is separated and he's gone off, and the wife is left there picking up the pieces without a job. There are the individuals that get, go to their GP and get a diagnosis of something fairly serious that is now going to impact on their employment. These situations are real, right? These are real problems and that consumers face. And I think trying to be a bit more human about about your approach. I think
Mm.
will only increase your brand, but I do believe it'll increase your collections, because if you can help them to help themselves, you will then help your collections problem. And I think we spoke last week, and I said, most religions are built on this idea of forgiveness, and we're all, we're a Christian population in the UK, Ireland primarily, but it's built on forgiveness, and yet when money's involved, I find people are a lot less forgiving, so we can forgive lots of other things, and we forgive kind of sports stars for doing crazy things, and we forgive our heroes for doing crazy things, but when somebody owes you money, you just tend to be less forgiving. So I think forgiveness is a key part of that equation, and how can we help our customers to have a better relationship with their finances, which in turn will mean they'll have a better relationship with us as a lender or a creditor or whatever it is we are.
Yeah. Interesting. So, and I know you've been doing work sort of internationally as well. So you've got a few different markets you're in. Have you seen it? Do you see it different between the different markets? I mean, how do you sort of see it evolving, or is it the same theme everywhere?
It's generally the same theme everywhere. What always interested me was in the UK, there's roughly about 120,000 insolvencies a year across circa 70 million population. In Canada, you have the same amount of insolvency numbers, but the population is half of the UK, and that kind of struck me as, why is that?
And on vulnerability, specifically on vulnerability, I mean, is there a what's your recommendation or a secret sauce, I suppose, in terms of like how do we identify people electronically from a vulnerability point of view? Because that always feels like that's been difficult, right? I mean, that's really what humans do, as you say, is detecting emotion and detecting, and interpreting like other human beings, and it's kind of what we do as a species in many ways. I mean, do you think there's a secret formula that we're going to discover through automation to help us, improve the vulnerability identification?
Well, I definitely think through the data we can start to kind of make predictions and kind of profile individuals in terms of where we think, where we've seen this type of profile go wrong before. The data is the key there. For example, if we know inflation is going to rise by 3 or 4%, and we apply that across a kind of portfolio of consumers which we believe are kind of borderline, we can see the impact that's going to have if their salary doesn't also increase. So we'll see their impact on their income and expenditure, and how that then will impact into their ability to pay back their liabilities. So I think the data is the key piece there in predetermining that kind of card. And maybe that's then where you marry up that data piece with kind of call center piece where you identify certain people and you pick up the phone and you say, listen, kind of noticed that things have gotten tight over the last few months. Is there a problem? Now you're being proactive about it. In all businesses, you always talk about being proactive and reactive. But the only way we can be proactive is to kind of have a data set there that allows us to project, allows us to predict. And I think that's what open banking gives us. But you've got to do it. You've got to use it. You've got to. The data is no good if you just say, well, let's capture it. You've got to then go and start apply some modeling to it to say, what the potential outcome. And look, for insolvencies, for example, it's clearly defined what the criteria is for someone to be insolvent. And once you start kind of applying that criteria to a portfolio of cases or data, you could probably project or predict or see or even kind of apply a RAG status, a red, amber, green status across certain individuals where you say, okay, I can see them heading. They're very close to that, hitting all the key criteria points that they're going to meet some of the solvents.
So this sort of like data and modeling piece is sort of like, it's a bit like a snowball that's starting to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, when we always want these things to happen sort of like almost like straight away. I mean, how long do you think it'll take to just gradually improve until we sort of, we're almost there in terms of like rolling out and having sort of improved decisioning, those kind of things? I mean, do you think it's going to happen in the next year, or do you think this is going to be something that's going to happen over 5-10 years? I mean, what's the expectations around timeframes?
Well, at Aryza, we're kind of building some of that modeling. So we are looking at data, and we are trying to kind of model out predictions and projections that we can then kind of use to sell to our customers and show them the benefits of more accurate provisioning, show the benefits of being proactive versus reactive. So I'd expect, and it's like any of these things, there'll be a version 1, and then these things will start to evolve, and we won't be the only ones looking at this right now. I think there's lots of people kind of looking at this. Where Aryza has the kind of an advantage is that, as I said, we provide solutions across the full debt cycle. So we look at things holistically. We don't necessarily look at things from an insolvents perspective or a lending perspective. We try and look at things holistically and join the different points on that circle, and try and be that's where we get our relevance from. Is being able to go to a lender, for example, and saying you've declined somebody, but now they've left without a solution, when actually that person you've declined them because they're indebted. So aren't you better off to increase your brand to present to that consumer or that corporate a debt solution? Aren't you better off redirecting them? And now you're seen as somebody that's being helpful rather than as someone that's just declined me. You've helped me now, and you've signposted me in the right direction. And equally, you have it on the insolvency side. You have consumers thinking they're insolvent, and then when you actually look at their data, you say, well, actually, you're not insolvent. You just need to sort your finances out, and actually, you should just go and get a consolidated loan, and then do the following top 5 things, like check you've got the right benefits, get the best kind of electricity deal, broadband deal, etc. And then you don't need to even consider insolvency. So I think the data is the key here, and doing something with the data is what matters. Not just capturing the data, is actually going and doing something with it.
Given where we are in the year now, where do you think we go from here? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around, and you've mentioned it, around insolvency numbers being low, delinquency numbers being low, and we're sort of waiting for a wave basically to come through, and it keeps getting pushed out with more COVID sort of extensions. When do you think it's gonna hit? When and how do you think it's gonna hit? Like later on in the year? What's your feeling?
Yeah, well, we've had to kind of constantly rethink our projections because of the extension, the forbearance, and the government scheme. So it's quite difficult to get a sense, really. I think obviously the cavalry of vaccines that has just arrived is really positive from a health perspective. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think once we get over the kind of health threat, we then have a real threat to livelihoods, because suddenly then the government's schemes stop, forbearance is stopped, and then it's about how the lenders and creditors react to that. Are they going to go in hard? Is there going to be a more softly approach to kind of chasing liabilities? I mean, there's some sort of key question that I don't know what the answer is. from kind of consumer point of view, you hope that that whole TCF principle is taken seriously, and that when forbearance stops, that there isn't just this hard and fast kind of, okay, let's chase, that people actually think, hold on, people need a bit of time now to get back on their feet, because the government schemes have just stopped. You can't expect people to be able to switch back on and be back to their kind of the financial security they had previously overnight. It will take time. I mean, there's a feeling that the worst affected are going to be the shops, the barbers, the pubs, the restaurants, and not necessarily the corporate institutes. What states particular sectors are left in, I'm not sure. My sense is it will be later this year. My sense is that by summer, the summer months are going to kick in, and we know through winter flus that the trends are that these things tend to be bigger in the winter, and then as summer kicks in, they tend to die. And like we seen that last year, in the summer months, the COVID numbers were down, and then as soon as we came out of the summer months, they started to rise again. So we know there is that seasonal trend there. So my expectation is that seasonal trend will continue. Summer will start to the numbers will start to lower, but hopefully by summer that the number of vaccinations or the vaccination programs have accelerated or they have good momentum, that come next winter we're actually in a much more sustainable position. And at that point then, I think there's some big decisions for the government and for the financial institutes on kind of forbearance and the kind of the government schemes. But I wouldn't expect that till probably post summer. But again, that's my opinion.
We always want there to be almost like a switch. It's almost like it's going to be on or it's off. It's going to start. It's going to stop. The reality is that these things tend to be much more sort of slow and usually a bit longer than we think. So maybe it's there's a lot of discussion around whether it's going to be sort of March, April we start to see the numbers. Maybe it's going to be the summer, and maybe it's going to be even the autumn. Maybe that we start to see from an arrears point of view, because it all needs to flow through the system.
Yeah.
I mean that's probably the latest I've heard, I think. So it could be. Well, Colin, thanks very much. I really appreciate making the time. It's fascinating to talk and hear a bit about your perspective around what you think is going to happen and around data, and how we can sort of customize things for customers. So I appreciate that very much, and thanks for making the time. So thank you.
Cheers, Chris.
Okay.